Only the outsider has that perspective. Whether it was Bolivia, Venezuela, Costa Rica, Argentina, Cuba, I was able to do this, and I urged that everyone could appreciate what the outside view counts. When I tried to publish when they wanted to publish my Mexican Revolution, Federal Expenditure and Social Change in Mexico, the big debate in the Mundo de Cultura was, why didn't a Mexican do this? How can we honor an American? Wow. Really, there was an argument, a big fight. So they agreed to publish only after they changed the budgetary procedure so that you could no longer present a budget that was meaningless and double it after they passed the budget. They made all the adjustments that they never published, and then they would have the military getting all they were supposed to get, and the teachers, all they were supposed to get in absolute terms, but in relative terms, it was getting a pittance. But they hid it from everybody. In one hand, it was good, and the other hand, it was bad. The teachers got left out, but the military did too. And the teachers shouldn't have been left out. The military, yes. But that book, nobody's ever picked up on it. It's not like elite law, which it's easy for everybody to follow. How do you get in and examine all the budgets? And of course, by 1977, the second edition of the Mexican Revolution came out, Federal Expenditure. It included a three-part, the second part in Spanish that never came out in English, but it's now in English, not in the book, but in other forms. And it was comparing the Mexican budgets to the budgeting process in Costa Rica and Bolivia and Venezuela, mostly Costa Rica and Mexico and Bolivia, Costa Rica, Mexico. And I got great honors in Bolivia when I went back one time, and I had a big dinner for me. I didn't know what it was, and a guy was reading about his view of the budgets in Bolivia. He just returned from Mexico in exile because he'd been critical, wound up had to flee Bolivia at certain times because of the problems of analyzing data. That he wanted to analyze it correctly, and nobody wanted that. But he was reading it, and I said, my God, this is brilliant, what he's saying. And then at the end he said, and those are the words of James Wilkie. I was, what? I wrote that. You know, how do you remember everything you wrote? But I sure rang a bell with me. But he had used that book, that second edition of the Mexican Revolution, because he was teaching in UNAM, and he wanted the students to read about Bolivia and the budgeting in both countries, and Costa Rica, where they have a fourth power. The Contralor General is a fourth power. They can override even the Supreme Court on expenditures. But the whole idea that I didn't recognize, but I agreed with, was interesting. That I was getting an homenaje and I didn't know it. And I'm pleased now that I know it. And that we capture how you got started. And of course you don't know, probably, or you may suspect, because you've seen his name on the cover of all of the oral history books. And now he'll be on the Pacis Tensoro book, Oral History, which will finally come out 55 years later. He's the one who's really transcribed and edited and made it possible for people. I can't do these things. It takes somebody like Raphael, who's an editor, who knows the academic world, who knows how to put these things together and pull the interviews together.